to order the August 10th special meeting of Ann Arbor City Council. Mr. Gerhart, would you please read the order and notice of call of special session?
Notice is hereby given that a special session of the City of Ann Arbor City Council will be held electronically on Monday, August 10th, 2020 at 7 p.m. for the following purpose. Resolution to order election, approve charter amendment of the City of Ann Arbor City Charter sections to establish nonpartisan nomination and election for the offices of mayor and council and determine ballot language for this amendment. 7 votes are required.
Thank you. All who are able, please rise to join us for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Gerhart, would you please call the roll of council?
Councilmember Hayner.
Somebody needs to unmute him.
Here.
Councilmember
Trying
Bannister.
to be, yeah.
Here.
Councilmember Griswold.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lum.
Here.
Councilmember Grand.
Here.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Here.
Mayor Taylor.
Here.
Councilmember Eaton.
Here.
Councilmember Nelson.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Present.
Councilmember Remlali.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Gerhart. Would someone please move the approval of the agenda? Moved by Councilmember Remlali, seconded by Councilmember Griswold. Councilmember Hayner, could you perhaps turn mute your sound? Thank you. All in favor of the agenda, please say aye.
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 Okay, the agenda is approved. Would someone please move item DC1, the resolution to order election, approved charter amendment of the Ann Arbor City Charter sections to establish nonpartisan nomination and election for the offices of mayor and council and determine ballot language for this amendment. Moved by Councilmember Remlali, seconded by Councilmember Griswold. Discussion? I may. First, I would like to thank Councilmember Remlali and Councilmember Bannister for co-sponsoring this resolution. And I'd like to thank Councilmembers Remlali, Eaton, and Griswold for calling a special meeting tonight so we can consider this. This resolution is very straightforward. It simply says we'll place on the November 3rd ballot the question of whether local elections in Ann Arbor for mayor and city council should be changed to a nonpartisan basis. A question residents have not had the opportunity to weigh in on since the 1950s. I suspect the discussion tonight will focus on the merits of partisan versus nonpartisan local elections. So it's critical to reiterate what this resolution does and does not do. The resolution does not in itself change the basis of local elections to nonpartisan. City council does not have that authority, only the voters do. What the resolution does do is place the question on the November 3rd ballot for voters to decide. Approving this tonight simply provides Ann Arbor voters the opportunity to decide the question. We've had this same discussion 4 times in the last 5 years. In 2015, 2016, and 2018, there were not the required 7 votes to pass the resolution. A year ago in 2019, however, there were 7 affirmative votes. The Mayor Taylor vetoed the resolution, and his action prevented the voters from having the opportunity to decide the question. Anyway, I believe there are several reasons nonpartisan elections in Ann Arbor make sense. Perhaps the most compelling is that with nonpartisan elections, the deciding election will always be in the higher turnout November election, and that serves to strengthen democratic representation. Currently, the deciding elections are the August primary elections where turnout is about 1/3 of the voters, or roughly half the turnout in November, where about 2/3 of registered voters cast ballots. The way nonpartisan local elections would work in Ann Arbor is that if there were no more than 2 candidates, there would be no primary at all, just the vote in November. If there were 3 or more candidates, there would be a primary in August, with the top 2 vote getters moving on to the November election. In either case, the deciding election is the higher turnout November general election. Ann Arbor is a clear outlier in still conducting our local elections on a partisan basis. Only 3 cities in Michigan have partisan local elections: Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, and Ionia. And outside of Michigan, most cities conduct nonpartisan local elections, and all of the cities we often benchmark ourselves with, Boulder, Madison, Berkeley, Austin, have nonpartisan local elections. I also believe having nonpartisan elections would encourage more people to get involved in city elections as candidates and as educated voters. A potentially broader candidate pool is a positive, and with nonpartisan elections, some voters will spend more time studying candidates and their positions, and that's also a positive. I also believe party labels don't inform voters on the key municipal issues, and you don't need to look any further than Ann Arbor to see the evidence of that. Despite being a one-party town, there are certainly philosophical differences and diverse positions on key local issues. Bottom line, while I think there are very strong arguments for conducting local elections on a nonpartisan basis, this resolution is for the 5th attempt time, simply placing the question on the ballot for voters to decide. And for important questions like this, that's the way it should be. Thank you very much for your consideration and for listening. Councilmember Remlawi.
Thank you, Councilmember Lum, for bringing us up to speed on how this would work and the history behind this. It is another attempt, and hopefully not a futile attempt. But I know we have 7 council members here tonight that would support this. It was vetoed by the mayor the first time. We had a council member tell us back then they would be able to support this if it was put to the ballot to ask the voters in a presidential election. And that person is my colleague in the 5th Ward, Chip Smith. He said he'd have no problem supporting putting this to the vote during a presidential election. There is no bigger presidential election of my lifetime than the one that is set this November 3rd. And I think it's a great opportunity for my colleagues, and I can't express how much I would love to see my counterpart in the 5th Ward honor his pledge that he made a year ago to us in support of this in a presidential election. I mean, there are many reasons why I support nonpartisan elections, and I don't want to go over too much on my time as I normally do. I know though, just a quick Google search, 40% of people who were polled in May of 2020, which not that long ago, just a few months ago, 40% of the people who responded to this identified themselves as independent voters. Only 25% identified themselves as Republicans and 31% as Democrats. There is a huge part of our community who believes that they have not had an opportunity to be represented in political discussions. I believe that what we have in a one-party town is hegemony. And any type of hegemony is not good for democracy. I believe there needs to be a balance of power. There needs to be a balance of ideas, balance of perspectives in order to get to the most healthy and democratic way of governing of people. So I've heard of the reasons why the D moniker means so much, but in the 2 years that I've had the opportunity to serve Ann Arbor, I haven't had the opportunity to do much when it comes to the issues that pertain to the D that have been outlined by our mayor, and I'll reserve my time for a second chance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Griswold?
Yes, I see nonpartisan elections as just a piece of what needs to be done.
Griswold? I think you're frozen and
Voting, which I hope will be approved. Yes.
Councilmember Griswold, could you start over? Sorry, you broke up and then your screen froze and so did your voice, unfortunately.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I see nonpartisan elections as simply one piece of the goal of more democratic elections, democratic with a lower D. With nonpartisan elections, we could also add ranked choice voting as the next step. And we also would need to change our elections for local officials to odd years, because we would not want to be having ranked choice voting during a presidential election, because ranked choice voting requires a second ballot. So anyway, I see this as a first step, and hopefully we can bring back ranked choice voting in the very near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bannister?
Councilmember Griswold just explained some of the things that I wanted to bring up too, about how we've been hearing a lot about the ranked choice voting, but that requires 2 ballots. And so we can't do that in a presidential year, but we could do that in odd years. And that would be if there were, yeah. So that sounds good too. As everything that's already been said, more democratic with a lower D, and getting those other 70 to 90% people who aren't voting, allow them to participate more fully. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any hands raised at this time. And Councilmember Hayner or Mayor Taylor. Mayor Taylor, your hand just went up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Lum. But before getting to my remarks, I'd just like to also thank you for chairing the meeting. As members of the public may infer, I'm outside of Zoom range, but I am participating, and I'm grateful for your chairing and helping out. So thank you.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
I'm, of course, going to vote against the resolution, and if it comes and if it does indeed pass, I'm going to exercise my veto. I am a proud Democrat, and I am proud of Democratic Party values. A candidate's affiliation as a Republican or a Democrat conveys clear and unambiguous information to voters regarding that person's value set. Their vision of America as an inclusive, pluralistic society, their support for government action to achieve the common good, their acceptance of, the fact that healthcare is a right, their views with respect to, civil rights and, frankly, science and the exigency, the imperativeness of affecting carbon neutrality. The partisan label has incredibly important has incredibly important information with respect to a candidate's political philosophy, and it has direct relevance to local government. If you can imagine a Republican-led city council, would they support the existence and empowerment of the Human Rights Commission, the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission, the existence of Ann Arbor's Climate Action Plan, the 820 plan, the $800,000 a year to affect our climate action plan, $1.2 million for direct human services, additional taxes for affordable housing, additional taxes presented to the voters for sidewalk improvements, rigorous compliance with prevailing wage, cooperation with our city's bargaining units after right to work, the city's operation of hundreds of units of affordable housing, the spending of millions of dollars on public housing that is to ensure that it is in good repair, energy efficient, and safe, successful efforts to build a 100% score on the Human Rights Campaign's LGBTQ Municipal Equity Index, local bans on coal tar and phosphorus to protect our river, limited use of road salt, support of our refusal to cooperate with ICE detainer requests. This list goes on. Local government is government in action, and Republicans and Democrats view government in action differently. That's at the core of the two parties' ideologies, and it's critically important that voters understand who is presented to them at the ballot box. And so I'm going to support party identification. I guess I'd further say, and finally, I would be interested in exploring further a California-style open election where we can have two Republicans or two Democrats or one Republican, one Democrat get to the general election. That strikes me as an interesting approach. Further and finally, in the event that this were to pass and this were to be adopted, the most powerful people in Ann Arbor politics would become the City Democratic Party. The City Democratic Party would then be in a position to affect its endorsement. People would look at a nonpartisan election, look at the nonpartisan ballot and say, well, who's the Democrat? The City Democratic Party will tell you who the Democrat is, who they endorse. And in my view, that would be open and shut. And the City Democratic Party, for all its glories, is not a body that represents the city as a whole. It's a set of people who have the ability and interest to engage in politics, and bless them for doing it. But that's not a body in which we should put that much local power. I guess that's all I'd like to say on this go around. Perhaps there'll be an opportunity for later.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Nelson?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just a couple of comments. I'm going to support this resolution because what we have seen in our local politics is differences that do not relate to party being framed in such a way that moneyed interests can couch themselves with the label of liberal Democrat or progressive Democrat, when that's not really the issues that we're talking about. And I guess I'm intrigued to hear this issue framed in terms of Republican and Democratic because, and the issues that that one might associate with those party names, because we actually already know where somebody who calls themselves a liberal Democrat was not in support of rigorous police oversight. And so we actually know that being a Democrat and having that D by your name does not necessarily mean support for something that we value or should value as a community, I believe. And the other point that I would make is this question is really about including the voters that are part of our student community. And I supported a measure for ranked choice voting at our last meeting. I supported that in theory, but as an actual measure to put on the ballot, it was not going to have any impact on including our student community in a contested election in November. Putting this on the ballot will have an actual effect of including our student population in a contested election in November. And I guess my final point would be, if we're going to talk about the power of endorsements and parties that have an opportunity to have influence in our community, I would argue that the party we should be talking about is the Democratic Socialists. We saw in just this last election cycle, a number of progressive organizations put their weight behind and put their endorsements behind Democratic Socialist candidates who would have a better shot, I believe, if we had a contested election in November. And I certainly hope that we're not fearful about having students participate in our elections, because I suspect that our elections would actually skew further left if we made sure that we had contested elections in November that were inclusive of the student population. So I will support this resolution as I did the last resolution around reforming our elections. I think that it's important that we move away from August and we include more voters in our conversations about who our local leaders should be. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Ramlawi.
Yeah, I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but I'm just going on the record, and I appreciate comments being made by my colleagues. They're powerful and they're truthful. We always talk about more participation, more voter participation, more public input. And we know with the current system, that's not what we're getting in terms of results. We're not getting the most participation. We're not getting the most public input by holding our elections that effectively decide who the leaders are in August. And the arguments to continue this partisan path are not convincing. And frankly, all we're asking is this to go to the voters, to have a democratic exercise in this debate. I mean, if we are one of the most highly educated cities in the nation, and if the city feels that having the party label associated with these type of offices at the local level is that important, then I think the voters will decide that. But the frustration comes from being vetoed on this, having 7 council members, possibly 8 tonight if one keeps their word, wanting to give this to the voters to decide. The endorsements can come from above, and I think that's what the endorsements. If this whole endorsement thing doesn't really, we already have endorsements. We already saw what happened in this last election, elections before that. It's one of the reasons why I got involved in an odd year election, is to give myself a chance at winning, because I didn't have the establishment support. And we know that locally here, if you don't have the local establishment support, you're not going to get it unless you got some serious name recognition, or you can pull a trick out of your hat. It's not happening. It's not going to happen anymore with even year elections. This does not open the tent for more people, and it flies in the face of the argument of inclusivity and diversity and more participation. That's just smoke and mirrors, in my opinion. Let's give this to the voters. Let the voters decide as to what is best form of government for their community. That's all we're asking for, is this to go to a vote. And if it gets vetoed, it'll just be a clear division in how this city is being led. And I'm sure this issue will be addressed again, and perhaps not addressed at city council, but addressed with signatures.
Thank you, Councilmember Ramlawi. Councilmember Smith.
First, let's be clear that this proposal does not move away from August elections. An August primary is still required if there are more than 2 declared candidates. In my communications with the attorney's office, eliminating the August primary requires another separate ballot issue. The rest of my comments, I'd like to quote former council member Graydon Crapole in the remarks he made from the city council table on July 2nd, 2018, addressing this exact same motion. I've spent a lot of time watching that meeting today to prepare for this evening. He said, quote, "I think we need to look at change to look at greater participation. But if I fall back on this, it should not be done at this table. It should not come from us. It should be led and done by the people. Voting is the foundation of our democracy, with elections as the vehicle which residents and citizens express their desires. Elections are a fundamental part of the American systems. Politicians should not drive the discussion on changing elections. There's a whole host of things we need to discuss with the public. and we haven't done that. The decision to have nonpartisan elections should be made outside of this table. It needs to be resident-driven, voter-driven. This is among the most significant decisions we will make, and there's been no process to this. There's been an absolute lack of process. There's been no public participation, no public input. For an issue important as this, the drive to change needs to come from the voters. He went on to observe that, quote, nonpartisan voting is not without its faults. In particular, nonpartisan voting disadvantages and disenfranchises the poor and working class and gives disproportionate power to those already in power and those who already have influence. I also went back to what I said during that same meeting. I said that an issue of this magnitude should go before the electorate in a large turnout election. What seems to be forgotten about my comments from July 2nd, 2018 is that I also said was that going to nonpartisan elections needed to be a part of a broader community discussion about governance and reform, that we need to make it easier for residents to participate in government. Now, I've heard all sorts of talk about me, quote unquote, keeping my word. Now, government demands that representatives use all information they have available to make decisions to benefit the whole of the city. And in having 2 years to reconsider the idea of nonpartisan local elections, the data that I've seen is that Ann Arbor is a Democratic Party town, even more so over the last 2 years. Like the mayor, I am concerned that eliminating partisan elections makes a very small interest group the kingmaker in our process. But more importantly, it's such a small and exclusive organization, not very many people are able to participate or do participate, that it actually makes the democratic process worse. Now, the idea of keeping one's word instead of using new data and information to make the best decision to empower all of Ann Arbor is anathema to good governance. I understand that some of my colleagues wish me to endorse this issue and to vote to overturn the mayor's certain veto. I will not. I look at this body and I can point to lots of places where people have changed their minds about things they have said publicly. I don't see any need to rehash those now, but I'm certainly prepared to. I trust that all of you used new information to make what you felt was a better decision. In closing, I cannot say it any better than Councilmember Crapol did back in 2018. I would point people to his comments that begin at 3 hours and 22 minutes into the meeting. This discussion this evening has been a repeat of this same debate from that evening, and there has been an absence of any public process or discussion in the interim. This came to us at the last minute in a hastily called special session when 2 council members and many staff are traveling or on vacation. The sponsors of this resolution have not taken any of the steps that both Councilmember Crapol and I talked about in 2018. There's been no task force, no public outreach, no subcommittee studying how we elect our leaders, how we govern ourselves. There's been no public outreach or engagement on this issue. It doesn't even eliminate the August primary, which I said back in 2018 was something I see as important. Sponsors have made no attempt to address the issues that concern me or to broaden this discussion. My position from 2018 has not changed. I'm not going to support this. I'm going to vote to sustain the mayor's veto. And finally, in the months to come, I will bring forward a proposal for a task force to provide City Council with recommendations on our elections. As Councilmember Crapol said, we need to be looking at everything: our ward system, the number of wards we have, number of representatives we have, partisan or nonpartisan elections, ranked choice voting, and the mayor's role in governing. All of these things need to be addressed together holistically. Reform-minded people understand this most basic principle. I am all for reform, but this proposal does not achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Okay, I will speak now. This is my second and last time, and I will try to address some of the points that you made. I'm disappointed, obviously, Councilmember Smith, but not surprised, since this will be the, you voted against this in July of 2016, July of 2018, and July of 2019, and now August of 2020. To chastise council and say this was sprung on people and there's been no information provided. We discussed this and voted on placing the question of nonpartisan local elections on the ballot 4 times again in the last 5 years. This is hardly a new discussion. It's the 5th time in 6 years that we've discussed the exact same proposal. And I think what's lost in this, the rhetoric, the statements imply that we're making a decision here about this. We're not. It's simply about letting the voters decide. There's no reason to deny voters the opportunity to decide the question. I mean, and the argument's been made that if this were so important to residents, they get, I don't know, they do the work, they get the petition signatures. I find that nonsensical and anti-democratic to force residents to jump through hoops to collect signatures on an issue where Ann Arbor remains the clear outlier. Again, what this does, you talk about primaries. Yeah, if there is no more than 2 candidates, there is no primary. And the one election is in November. If 3 or more, there is an August primary. The top 2 vote getters move to November. But in all cases, the deciding election is in November. And obviously, if we're interested in higher turnout, strengthening Democratic representation, I'll just throw some numbers out. I mean, again, the turnout in November is about twice what it is in August, and that's significant. August, the turnout in 2016, 16%, 2018, 35%, 2020, 35%. November, 2016, it was 67%, 2018, 63%. 2020, it'll be massive. And so, you know, roughly 2/3 of the voters in November participate versus 1/3 in August. And the current system, it's all decided in August. So this does decrease the likelihood of uncontested elections. That 2020 ballot, there are no contested races. And I do think it's a positive to have more voter scrutiny on issues, candidates' positions on issues. And again, clearly we are an outlier. So I will just say too, you talk about education, there's an army that's already forming. People are going to, right, so the effort to collect petition signatures is going to start almost immediately. It's a big bar, but it's doable, and people want to get places on the ballot. So folks are going to have to assist in collecting 5,000 to 6,000 signatures, and there will be an education component to this as well. So we can educate people about why this is important, frankly. Thank you. Councilmember Griswold?
And I'm sorry, just to interrupt, I apologize. Councilmember Hayner is having difficulties connecting, and he wants to talk. He's able to talk, but he's
okay.
pound 9 is not working.
Okay, I will. Councilmember Griswold was next, and then I will call on Councilmember Hayner. Thank you, Councilmember Ramley. Councilmember Griswold?
Yeah, I just want to expand this conversation a bit, because our greatest challenge is not whether we have partisan or nonpartisan elections. It's removing our current president. And as people spoke yesterday at the Dingle Unity Luncheon, when we do not welcome others into the Democratic Party, and when we assume that anyone who's not a Democrat is a Trumpian Republican, that does not bring more people in. And I don't, maybe people don't understand how critical this is, but it is extremely upsetting to me. Our country is at the brink of a disaster. And if we're going to be good Democrats, we had better encourage more people to join us, and do that by working together. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hayner, I see that you've now been unmuted, so we're calling on you.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. I appreciate it, because any of my messaging wasn't letting me raise my hand, so thank you. From hundreds of miles away, I got to tell you, I hear some interesting conversation going on right now. And what I hear a lot of duplicity, and I hear a lot of hypocrisy, and really a lot of arrogance too. I got to say, like, for what I've seen and observed in these last 2 years on council is that folks on council they use the issues they want to use for their own gain, for their own benefit, and they and excuse the ones that others want to use. For the mayor to consider vetoing yet again the majority of council who represent the majority of people. I know that you're going to come in after November and tell me what a majority mandate you have, Mr. Mayor, but you fail to recognize ours and you veto that. That's just arrogant. It's also arrogant to presume that anyone who doesn't have a D in front of their name and your lawn sign in their front yard is some kind of Trump Republican, like Councilwoman Griswold said. You don't know how other people think. You don't know how other people act, what their values are. You're making broad assumptions that if any people made that against anyone else, any other group of people, and I know a lot of people at this table are fond of identity politics, if any of those are made about any other group of people in our community or our country, you fall into a rage. And so I think when we say that we want to be inclusive except for you, the only thing Republicans are good for, Mr. Mayor, is writing your campaign and your slate checks, apparently. Now, let me speak to what Mr. Smith said, and not a whole Chip Kenny kind of vote. I didn't go back to that meeting. I recall him mentioning that he'd like to see this in a November ballot, and I appreciate that. We can't hold people to something they said a while back. But to say that this matter is somehow different from ranked choice voting, which appeared at the last minute, which had no study committee recommending it to us, which had no groundswell there wasn't a ballot proposal, there wasn't an attempt at gathering signatures to put on the ballot, none of that. And so it's okay for that, but it's not okay for this because you don't like this, but you like that. And so that's the kind of hypocrisy that I've had 2 years enough of. And so I hope that moving forward, and I'm sorry you didn't speak at the Congresswoman Dingell's unit event on Sunday, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if you weren't invited to speak or if you chose not to speak. If you have anything to say about unity, now's a good time to say it. I'm going to support this like I've supported the last times, like I've always supported, like I supported when I ran in 2013, when I ran as an independent in November, so the students would have a choice. So the students would have a voice and someone representing them on council. So I've been pushing for independent, nonpartisan elections as long as I can remember, and I'm going to do it again tonight. And I thank you all for letting me speak.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Painter. Councilmember Bannister?
I just had a question for Mayor Taylor, and I appreciated that long, passionate list of all of our accomplishments, from A20 to community police oversight to affordable housing to the 1.2 million for human services and the climate. So all of that was a great list, Mayor Taylor, of all of our accomplishments. But the question is, how do the other great cities that have nonpartisan elections, how do they manage all of the accomplishments that they have in Boulder and Madison, and accomplishments are not unique to the city of Ann Arbor. Would you indulge me with how do other great cities do it if they have the nonpartisan elections?
I'm focusing on Ann Arbor. I'm not paying too much attention to what other cities are doing in this regard. I think that the accomplishments that we've identified, which are a subset, I think, of where we are as a city, I think that those are consistent with the values of the Democratic Party and are, generally speaking, and certainly as currently constituted, inconsistent with the values of the Republican Party. And I think that it's important that voters have that information, that voters understand the political philosophy of the people that are on the ballot.
Councilmember Graham?
Thank you. I'd like to just speak to Councilmember Bannister's question. In 1971, Boulder set a 55 foot height limit on most of their buildings. And in doing so, got their, gentrified the city so much that the average cost of a housing unit in Boulder was right around $1 million. While we do look to some of these peer cities for things that they do well, if you talk to peers in any of these, friends who live in any of these cities, I think that they will find a lot of the same frustrations that people who say they're for certain progressive issues don't always act that way. So I do think that the partisan label gives us some ability to at least hold someone accountable to those values. Maybe they may stray from them. Maybe there may be some variation, but it still does hold you up. And if you look at, for example, housing policy between our Republican and Democratic or presumed Democratic nominee at the federal level, you'll see incredibly significant differences in terms of one who, would tell me to go become a suburban housewife, and another who really looks to make great strides in terms of affordability. And I believe that's true for every issue that's facing our city. So I will be, as I have before, because I believe that there are very significant trade-offs to going nonpartisan. Don't believe that we're there, and will be voting no.
I'm looking for other hands. I don't see any at this time. Councilmember Hayner, I don't know if you want to speak one more time. You had a lot to say. We heard it.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I think it's evident that what we have is people who need the label. They need the label. They need the party's blessing to continue to rule. And, people talk about, we're never going back. So I have a copy of the Observer from, I don't know, when I was in college down here. And so I think it was 84, 85. And the headline in that article was, will Ann Arbor ever see a Democrat again? There were so many, that's the way cities go. They go back and forth. But nothing has changed about our city. It has nothing to do with the label. The only people that are holding up this label are people who need the party mechanism prop up their campaign. And we saw that really what gets people elected in this town is money. And so if you got to hang a D on it to get them to write your check, well, that's fine. That's fine. Go ahead and veto the majority's will yet again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hayner. I see no other hands, so I think we're ready for a vote. Mr. Gerhart, would you please call the roll of council?
Nelson?
Councilmember Nelson, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
No.
Councilmember Rimlali?
Yes.
Councilmember Hayner?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lum?
Yes.
Councilmember Grand?
No.
Councilmember Ackerman?
No.
Mayor Taylor?
No.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. If I may, just a question before we move on to public comment. Mr. Postuma, you're here, I believe. Since Mayor Taylor indicated that he will veto this, can you please, I sent you a couple of questions about this earlier today. Can you just, for the record and so everyone is aware, how much time after, since this is approved, how much time, I believe from the time you receive the minutes, the mayor has to release his veto message, and then whether or not it is feasible well, we know we don't have the votes clearly to overturn the veto. So can you just provide us the time frame for when the veto message will be issued?
Yeah, I'm sorry I did not see that earlier, Councilmember Long, so I apologize. We've given that information out before. I don't have Mr. Excuse me. I don't have Mr. Thomas on, but there is a short time frame for him to do that, and I can get it out of the charter. I believe it's within 72 hours, so he has time to do that. And then you obviously under the charter also have time to have a veto of this. You could have a motion for veto prepared for the next council meeting, as we've done before, for you to also prepare that.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. All right, thank you.
And I will get the exact time to you for the whole council by tomorrow.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you. We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have to sign up in advance. To speak at public comment general time, please dial the number on your screen, and that number is 877-853-5247. Again, that number is 877-853-5247. Enter the meeting number, which is 929-3607-3877. Again, the meeting number 929-3607-3877. After you have dialed the meeting ID and joined us, please enter *9. Please enter *9 to raise your hand so that you will be called on. You will be called upon by identification of the last 3 digits of your phone number. Speakers have 3 minutes to speak, so please pay close attention to the time. The clerk will notify you when 30 seconds are left and when your 3 minutes are up. When your 3 minutes are up, please conclude your remarks so that you can give the floor to others. Is there anyone here who would like to speak at public?
We do have one caller ending in 660.
Hello, my name is John Moran. I'm in Ann Arbor. I live here, and I'm very upset that the University of Michigan has decided to bring the students back to our town. And I think the result of this will be that Ann Arbor will be a COVID hotspot coming this fall. So Dr. Michael Osterholm from the Center of Infectious Diseases at the University of Minnesota, who predicted this disease outbreak that we're currently having. He didn't predict the pathogen, but he did predict the outbreak in 2017 in his book, The Deadliest Enemy, Our War Against Killer Germs. Several months ago, he said that the death toll in the United States will be from 800,000 to 1,600,000. So right now we're at 150. We are just getting started with this thing. And, I hope he's wrong. Maybe there'll be a vaccine, but on the basis of his knowledge, and he's very, very prominent in this field of epidemiology. So Harvard is not bringing their people back, so that's good enough for me. So anyway, the other news on COVID is that the study of 40 to 56-year-olds, and they found that people who had gotten the virus and recovered, had 78% of them had heart damage, as if they had had a heart attack. So how many of you are falling within that age range? And how many of your friends and loved ones are in that age range? And, we're looking at a big problem here with the students. Now, another recent news item on COVID, recent positives heavily in the 20 to 29 age group. So I checked out the university's guidelines. They're they sound reasonable, but the problem is if 80 or 90% of the students behave and follow the protocols and 20% don't, we're going to have a big disease outbreak here. And Many of the largest number of students from out of state are from California and Illinois. And how many of them have been partying on the beach all summer? And some of them who have been cooped up with mom and pop over the last 4 months, how are they going to feel when they get here and they're loose and goosey, you know? So what I'm asking is, okay, and then the other thing I wanted to mention was our own teenagers that live here, I've noticed them gathering together in groups in front of the Dairy Queen, 20 of them, with no masks, no social distancing. We drove around in the fraternity area a couple of weeks ago. We found 20 people at a table with no masks, no social distancing. So I'm asking you to have the police enforce the protocol, especially in the fraternities, because these guys are going to get drunk and act badly, and we're all going to pay for it. So how many lives do you want to have on your consciences? Please be strict. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Gerhart, if we have anyone else who wishes to speak, please enter *9. I see that.
We do. Caller ending in 231.
I think that's me.
Yes.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to speak. I had a suggestion for tonight. Yes, in regard to voting, this is Chuck Laux. I'm a member of Ward 1. I follow council fairly closely. It seems to me another alternative to having nonpartisan would be to have the elections in odd years, every 4 years. So there could be a ballot initiative to do that as well. I mean, that could be considered tonight. Maybe it might, let's see what the mayor has to say about that. That's all I'm going to say. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Next speaker, I see hands raised. Mr. Gerhart,
Caller ending in 936.
caller 936.
Hello, this is Zachary Story, and I wanted to speak about something I heard from a couple council members last meeting that frankly was inhumane, disgusting, and vile. Councilmember Hayner shared an anecdote which suggested evicting students who were not complying with COVID precautions from their houses. And in addition, after that, shutting off electricity and water, at which Councilmember Griswold was gleefully chuckling and smiling. And she later tweeted similar sentiments. And I even confronted her at the farmer's market on Saturday about it. And she told me, oh, I'm just talking about the students. They're temporary residents. They're not, you know, they don't really matter. And that doesn't sit well with me. I've come to learn that there is strong anti-renter sentiment in this city exhibited by some council members and some members of the public. And we make up over half of the population of the city. Now, all of you on council, except for Zachary Ackerman, are homeowners. So I really don't believe all of you have the best interests of renters at heart. And when I hear two council members speak like this about students, I think that can really stoke up anti-renter sentiment. It's kind of like paving the way to think of us as second-class citizens. And yeah, I'm very angry about it. I think that's not a way an elected official should be conducting themselves. And, you know, I would like an apology, but I'm not holding out hope from that because still waiting for apologies on the infamous chicken conversation. And Councilmember Griswold, I did see your tweets about that. but it wasn't an apology. It was just
30 seconds.
saying that you grew up poor, so you know you knew what it was like. There was no acknowledgement that you were wrong for having that conversation, and so I don't expect any acknowledgement that you're wrong in proposing these inhumane treatment of students. And I understand that we're in a pandemic and everything, like, but what would happen if you evicted people? They would be homeless, or they would move in with their friends, and it wouldn't solve anything except to be heinous. Thank you.
Mr. Gerhart, the next caller.
Caller 340.
Yes, greetings, City Council, Ann Arbor. My name is Luis Vasquez. I'm a resident of Ward 1. I'm very curious as to why public commentary was placed at the end of this meeting rather than at the beginning, as is usual for special sessions. And I'm kind of upset that I did not get the chance to express my opinion orally on this elections resolution directly to my council members prior to their voting. I recall after the last time that City Council engaged in this little bit of kabuki theater that Jane Lum stated the following to MLive. If he does veto a citizen petition drive to put the question on the ballot, will immediately kick off. Well, Jane, what happened to that citizen petition drive back then? Clearly, Jane Lum thinks that there's enough support among Ann Arbor's electorate to launch such a petition drive. So what stopped that from happening then, Jane? I'm really curious. And the way I see it, you're the one who should stick to your promises and your pledges. And this time you should either put up or shut up. Thank you for your time.
Next speaker.
Caller 326.
Hi, this is Jamie McGarrett. I'm a 31-year resident and now a resident of Ward 3. I was calling about the resolution tonight and wanted to voice my disappointment in council members voting affirmatively for this, the council members that did. I think this is bad timing and not well prepared to deal with a very complex issue. As such, I would encourage Mayor Taylor to veto this. I think that this needs to be taken up after some public input, after greater discussion, and after some of the tensions have been released and maybe some changes made on council, given the past couple weeks. I would say along those lines that I'm disappointed in some of the ways in which council members are communicating to other council members and to the mayor, in particular, Council Member Hayner. And, you know, I'm on multiple boards in our community, and I'm a longtime employee of the university. If I spoke like that to any of my coworkers or fellow board members or anything like that, I could understand someone not wanting to respond to me or communicate with me and not wanting to work with me and not being able to find common ground. I think it's problematic to have a governing body treating each other like that. And I as a taxpayer and as a member of this community, that's not what I would expect from my city council. So I would encourage folks to take a breath, try to treat each other a little bit better. This isn't social media. You're leading people on city council. And again, I encourage Mayor Taylor to veto this so that some fresh minds, some fresh perspectives can take a look at this issue. It's a very important issue. And it should be looked at in terms of not just party affiliation, but also ranked choice voting. was disappointed at the results of last week. But this should be looked at in it as gestalt in its entirety, I think, and some public feedback, some public input would be helpful along those lines. So again, I appreciate everyone's hard work, but I really wish that Councilmember Hayner and sometimes some of the other council members would treat each other better. It's disappointing and really kind of hurts to see people treating each other that way.
30 seconds.
So have a good night. I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.
Next speaker, please.
Caller ending in 205.
Hey, this is Joe Spalding. Real quick, I just want to thank the folks that voted yes here, because you all made it much easier to running certain campaigns for students to get them on council, and that's what I'm going to do if this thing goes through.
Is that it? Another speaker?
That's it. You have my time.
Mr. Gerhart?
Hello?
Caller ending in 684.
Yes. Yes, hi, this is Eric Sturgis from the First Ward, and I am calling from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I am a resident of Ann Arbor, Michigan. I just wanted to be clear that I am calling from Ann Arbor to voice my concern about Ann Arbor. I want to thank Councilmember Griswold for her work on the Unity Day yesterday, and it doesn't seem like it went very far. With some of the things I've heard. I keep hearing this, we need public input. We need public input. Well, if you put it on the ballot, isn't that public input? The public telling you how they feel. I don't see this as an issue that should be so divisive. Let the voters vote. And Ann Arbor has some of the smartest voters. And if it's truly not a good idea, they will vote against it. I think that we're getting caught up here in the party labels. And I think what I would say as a Democrat, I supported Bernie Sanders. He's an independent senator from Vermont. I think this is a lot of, we're getting caught up on identity politics here. I would like to see the voters have a say in this. And I think the voters should have a say in ranked choice voting once we get nonpartisan voting. I think they would both go well together. But thank you for your time, and I just wanted to reiterate that I'm calling from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gerhart, do you see any other callers?
We have one other caller, but their hand is not raised.
Okay. To speak, please enter *9 to raise your hand, and then you will be called on. I also don't see any other hands raised. So seeing no one, public comment is closed. Are there any communications from council?
Councilmember Hayner would like to speak.
Okay. I'm going to take them in the order, but since Councilmember Hayner, you are traveling, I will call on you first. Councilmember Hayner.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So just, since there's been so many false narratives put forward prior to this election, even tonight, some of these callers are calling in. I never suggested that we should shut off water and power. I pointed out that Governor Newsom of liberal California said he was going to do that to house parties and that we shouldn't consider doing that here, I don't think anybody would really think that that was a solution to anything. I spent my last 2 years fighting for water for this community, fighting for renters, trying to get some affordable housing going. Nothing happened for years in this community until we got on here. And now we get some affordable housing going, some rights, some tenant activism and things like that. That's great. I support that. Don't put words in my mouth. Go back and listen to what I said. I never said we should shut off power and water to houses. That's how lies get started. That's how people grab stuff and they put it on a postcard and they send it out. Now, to Mr. McGarrett, same for you. You're so hot to keep everybody's data in front of everybody. You and your buddies tape all my social media and post it somewhere. Let me ask you to do something for the community. Do the same thing for MLive, where people who don't want to pay to see political coverage copy those MLive stories and post them out there for somebody. How about that, okay? Keep the real story in front of people. That would go a long way towards helping this community. Instead of coming on here and complaining about how I speak to the mayor who hasn't answered one of my emails in 2 years, look after your own business and do something else for the community, all right? I would really appreciate that. I just think it's outrageous. Folks who are I'm just going to be frank. Mr. Mayor is pulling the strings of these people. He's using these people to to put words in our mouths and to say false things about us. And they're all your supporters. Go around and look at the yard signs in their yards. Mr. Mayor, it's time for you to rein people in if you want to have any hope of having any legacy of decency in that seat. Then I'll talk to you however I want. I will talk to Mr. Mayor however I choose.
Do we have council rules about ad hominem attacks?
We do. I will be bringing this up with the Rules Committee.
Hey.
Yeah. Also, while you're there, bring up the mayor using his private email address. And bring up the late addition of things to the council
Councilmember
agenda.
Painter, Councilmember Ackerman, Councilmember Smith. Mr. Gerhart, does Councilmember Hayner still have, well, there is no limit on the time. Councilmember Hayner, you may continue.
I had nothing to say. I'm not, there's no ad hominem attack.
Thank you. Okay.
I never said we should shut off power and water, people. That's a lie.
Okay. I think we've
the
got
record will show it.
Thank you. Councilmember Bannister?
Yes, I wanted to follow up on that first person from public comment who is worried about the killer germs and the students coming back. And I was wondering if, I know we don't have a lot of staff here, but I know that is a really big concern. We've all heard from a lot of people who are getting worried about the students coming back and bringing COVID-19 with them. And so I don't know if the staff that is here, Mr. Crawford, has anything to say tonight, or will give a more thorough report at our August 17 meeting. And my other piece was just a comment that we did, the city of Ann Arbor converted over to a new emergency notification system through Everbridge. And so if you want to be notified of emergency alerts, citizens are all encouraged to subscribe and register through washtenaw.org/alerts.
Thank you, Councilmember Bannister. I'm going to call on the remaining council members because we're in communications from council at this time, and then with council's indulgence, if it's okay with all of you, I would like to call on Mr. Crawford to speak to the questions about the university's plans and how the city's working with the university and all of that. Councilmember Griswold.
Yes, we do know that the Big Ten voted today to cancel football games. Financially, that's devastating, but from a health standpoint, that's probably good news. I am on record stating that I would support evictions and turning off water and power. And before someone starts putting that on social media, let me explain. There are fraternity houses in the city of Ann Arbor that are no longer affiliated with the University of Michigan. They were not following the rules and they broke ranks with the university and the Greek life system. Those fraternity houses, if they do not follow the rules and have large parties of over 100 people, underage drinking, and they become a public nuisance and a threat to our health in this community, I would support eviction and then turning off the power and water to those facilities so that such parties could not continue. And Tom, I can talk to you about this a little more because I don't know if you're aware that we have such houses that are not connected with the university. And they're in that situation because they did not follow the rules. Secondly, I'd like to share some good news. The governor will be announcing on August 13th a new automotive connected vehicle corridor from Corktown to Ann Arbor, Michigan. And this will further develop our reputation in autonomous vehicles. One of the things I'd like to see is that we address some of the known safety problems with vehicle design, such as the large front end of pickup trucks and SUVs. And I'd like to see Ann Arbor be a leader in lobbying that any autonomous vehicle has to meet the same safety requirements that exist in the European nations. And so this is an example of what the Mobility Committee would be working on, along with advocating for RRFBs on Huron, the crosswalk near Thayer. I've mentioned it many, many times. I'm getting many emails from MDOT. Most of them are outlining why it can't be done this year, rather than telling me how it can be done this year and what needs to be done. So I'll continue to work on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just want to, I have to say something in response to Councilmember Hayner's comments. I think we need to, as a body, ensure that we have a culture that diligently pays respect to people who call in to public comment. I think it's one thing to deride each other and to criticize each other. I think it's another to criticize those who give their time to share input. I think we have to self-reflect that there isn't a bogeyman of this mayor we've invented who pulls puppet strings, but in fact, there are members of the public who are dissatisfied with the ways in which we represent them, and they give a moment of their Monday evenings to share that feedback. And we'll be much more successful if we try to build bridges with those critics who are our bosses and work to further their goals and understand their goals than to attack them and to invent this puppet master because it's easier than addressing our own behavior. So I'll just leave it there. I think it would be tragic if the culture of this body extended to attack residents as well, and I want to nip that in the bud.
Thank you. Anyone else? Just a couple comments.
I was going to say something.
Okay, Councilmember Ramlawi.
Thank you. Unfortunately, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Unfortunately, we're ending this on another contentious note. I will just say, unfortunately, that line had been crossed before Councilmember Ackerman, while we were still meeting in council chambers, where members of this body did attack the public, and that happened in council chambers. So unfortunately, that line had been crossed already, and it's not coming from people who are being accused of it tonight. Unfortunately, the mayor finds himself in a very difficult position, being a leader, being a consensus builder. That's the job of a mayor. I mean, we have our jobs. We report to our constituents. We work on our constituents' issues, but we're not titled with the task of being a consensus builder and being somebody who speaks for the entire community. As Councilwoman Griswold pointed out earlier, the divisive nature of the rhetoric used by our mayor is causing a lot of turmoil throughout our community. Just tonight, we were talking about partisan elections and nonpartisan elections and what it means to be a Democrat and and if you're not subscribing to that, you're not subscribing to the mayor's form of being a Democrat, you are the other, and you are someone who we don't engage with, we don't appreciate their opinions, and we don't consider their thoughts. And that, my friend, is very divisive. And that's why we unfortunately have so many of these uncomfortable conversations at the table. And here we go tonight again, laboring through this meeting, trying to get a resolution passed so we can ask the voters a very basic democratic question that any Democrat, for that matter, would support if what was being purported is to be true. There would be no fear that we would fall prey to deceptive politics and be led by a bunch of backwards people. But yet that's what we're being, the fear mongering going on. And you're talking about a boogeyman. It's who's this, you know, who needs to subscribe, who's not, and so on and so forth. So I won't go in circles because I know I'm boring most of you, but you know, it's just disappointing to hear that the arguments and the double standards and the lack of taking accountability for our roles, and particularly a role of a mayor. And I'm sorry, I'll continue to labor that point, but it's an important point, and a point that I think we need to have made, and hopefully as we move forward, past errors can be corrected. But you know, things after this gets vetoed, petitions will get signed, and this will end up on the 2022 ballot. That's what's going to happen. 5,000 signatures is not very much to get in 5 wards. So look for this in 2022, brought to you by the people, not their leaders, because their leaders were silenced.
Councilmember Remlawi. Councilmember Brand.
Thank you. Just wanted to just speak to a couple of things that I heard this evening. One was that you need a separate ballot, which keeps being repeated for ranked choice voting. While the machines can't actually tabulate the votes, you don't need a separate ballot. That information from that ballot then just gets sent to something which basically has the sophistication of an Excel spreadsheet to then tabulate. So, so I just appreciate if we could stop saying that. I know we're not going to be talking about ranked choice voting for some time. And, you know, when ranked choice voting didn't go as I had hoped last week, I didn't then accuse any of my colleagues of being divisive or in someone's pocket. I understand that it's your choice as council members, and you're here, you know, many of you through November, some of you for 2 years after that, that you make your choices and that we can have respectful disagreement. I also want to speak to Councilmember Mlawi's point. I wasn't going to speak, but the person who spoke at public comment that Councilmember Ackerman and I have both called out on occasion is also known to deny the Holocaust. So for me, like, I'm personally comfortable being on the other side of that line, calling that out, because, you know, they're members of distant members of my family who died in that situation. So so that's I do think that there is a critical difference there. But I also just want to echo Councilmember Ackerman's point that that it's really insulting to be called someone's puppet. I think that enough of you know me after working together for so many years to know that I have my own mind, even if some of my decisions have been criticized by some of us at this table with all sorts of names that I've never brought up, that I'm still not going to repeat today, but names that that person has never apologized to me for before they were at this table. So, so I think, again, we just need to, I would really like us to be able to move forward in the next few months together and make decisions that are good for the city. But if we continue to make accusations like those who won elections bought it, or, you know, it's just nonsense. So please understand that that you're accountable for your words, and let's just try to all self-reflect and not tear one another down with such nonsense. Thanks.
Councilmember Eaton.
Thank you. I just want to respond to a misconception about the ranked choice voting record from the last meeting. Currently, ranked choice voting is not legal in Michigan. There are 2 bills pending that would legalize it. House Bill 5281 says that you cannot have ranked choice voting on a ballot that has state or federal offices up for election. Some members of council have read that to mean that you'd have to have a separate ballot. I think you would have to actually change the date of your ranked choice ballot voting entirely, but that's neither here nor there. It can't be on the same ballot as a state or federal election. And so not only was it not legal, but even under the proposed legislation pending in Lansing right now, the recent primary would not have allowed ranked choice voting for local elections because it can't appear on the same ballot as those other offices. So just to make that clear, it's House Bill 5281 if you want to look it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Eaton. Okay, just a few comments I would like to make. First, I would like to make a public apology to Mr. Vasquez. Called in and called me out because he said I made a pledge a year ago. He's right that I would assist, lead, whatever, the effort to collect petition signatures to place this question on the ballot. I did not do that, and I would like to publicly and sincerely apologize for not doing that. A petition drive, talking about collecting 5,000 to 6,000 signatures, and honestly, serving on council, it's just, I couldn't do both. And this is a very demanding job. None of us have staff except for the mayor. That's appropriate that he has a staff person, but none of us have staff. And so we do all of our own work ourselves. So it was just not in any way, shape, or form possible. And I do apologize, which is not to say that people didn't reach out to me to offer assistance. They did then, and they are once again. And now I'm going to have free time, so I am going to be working on this. So as Mr. Vasquez said, put up or shut up, I'm going to put up. And then to the, but I do apologize for not doing this previously. I just didn't frankly have the time because I do think this is very important. And on ranked choice voting, I appreciate the clarifications you just made, Councilmember Eaton. I would just add as well, so I didn't support putting it on because at this point it's a hypothetical question. It's not ready. My position on that hasn't changed. If the legislature adopts ranked choice voting, enabling legislation, we have no idea what specific regulations, requirements, and processes of that enabling legislation will be. What the state does, if anything, would impact obviously what Ann Arbor does in that regard. So I do think, agree 100% that voters should decide these important questions when they are ready. And RCV is just not ready yet, but nonpartisan certainly is, because this is all about, for nonpartisan, it's just a question of who gets to decide, the residents or the elected officials. And I would defer any day of the week, month, year, etc., to the residents. Thank you. Any other council members who would like to make a comment? I see no one. Would someone move to adjourn? Moved by Councilmember Eaton, seconded by Councilmember Griswold. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for carving out time to meet